So we're going to start with Lisa, and Lisa, 1 minute of who you are and what you are. Tell the folks, and as always, then I will watch the time, okay? And I'll give you a little hand tap when it's time to pass the microphone down.
Good idea, because sometimes when you've experienced what we've all experienced, time isn't an issue. Anyway, it's just great to be here. I'm Lisa Garr. I host a radio show called The Aware Show. I've had Diane on my show and Coast to Coast AM as well. And I am so grateful to be here with my people, of people who understand and have experienced the light and know what it means to travel to places of absolute possibility and bring them back to this reality. I'm very much in this reality. I've been in the media for 18 years, broadcasting conscious media to millions of people a month, and I am so grateful to have a voice that I didn't have and use that for change. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I have a panel at 2 when I go into a long explain, but this, so I will spare the details, but in my near-death experience, it was a mountain biking accident, and I shattered my helmet in several places, caused myself some pretty severe brain damage, and had to rebuild my brain. And in the process of rebuilding through neurofeedback and some incredible cutting-edge science that I happen to have found, I literally rebuilt neuron by neuron, bridge by bridge, through neurofeedback, biofeedback, everything, acupuncture, every type of therapy that I used in order to rebuild my brain. But in that process of the near-death experience was when I experienced the most boundaryless, seamless place of possibilities. And I learned that everything, even our thoughts, are separate from ourselves, and that everything that we are and we feel and we become is. And that is where I've learned and operate my life from, that space. Sometimes I forget, and then I'm quickly reminded by God and the universe, this is the reality. That seamless space is the reality. So my experience as a near-death experiencer and knowing what it means to live in a place of possibility and to become the manifestation of what is and all that is. And my life pursuit is finding that space every single day.
Okay. A pleasure to be here with my whole NDE family here. You really feel at home. My name is Jacob Cooper. I come all the way from New York here to, my family here in IANDS, and I've been waiting a long time to be in this chair. Full-time I work as a, social worker. I'm a licensed social worker with the state of New York. I also am a hypnotherapist and Reiki master, and I run a lot of mindfulness groups at local colleges within the New York State area. I talk about my NDE and blog talk shows, and I do public presentations all throughout the United States, and Colorado, I guess, is one of them. I'm going to be featured in upstate New York soon, and so the journey has been about a year that I've come out of the NDE closet, and now here I am talking about it right in front of my community. So that's who I am, and it's a pleasure to meet every one of you. I've waited a long time, and my NDE happened when I was 5 years old. I had something called whooping cough, which has been vaccinated, but at the time when I was 5 years old, I suffocated, and I lost the one guarantee in life, which we all kind of rely upon, is our breath. And at 5 years old, I wasn't able to breathe, and every part of my body, one by one, just shut down like a power breaker, and my brain lost oxygen, and that shut down too. So it's very interesting when I'm hearing about all the speakers here today talking about the scientific element to NDEs and the brain as a filter between the two realms, and understanding the other side is almost like a radio dial, AM and FM kind of deal. But after that, everything opened up, from looking at my own Akashic Records to seeing family members waiting for me on the other side, tuning into previous lifetimes. I was also able to tune into what I would be doing here today, which is speaking about it, which was my one drive to stay. Within my NDE, I had the option that, many who have had NDEs talk about, where you could stay or go. And for me, I chose life. I chose to stay, and I'm forever grateful about it. And I chose to stay not because of myself or anything like that, but rather the message that I chose to devote my whole life to at 5 years old at the time and throughout this carnation. I recognize, from looking at previous lifetimes, why at 5 years old I had an NDE, where, when I was debating to stay or go, when I had my soul family surrounding me, surrounded by my spirit guides and archangels, they said, Jacob, do you want to stay or go? And immediately I was drawn back to my most prevalent lifetime, within this lifetime, which was a lifetime where I didn't believe that life would continue, and I didn't see past my own suffering and turmoil, and I took my own life. And many intuitives have picked up on that and have read that very clearly. But if you understand the allegory of many NDE survivors, you understand that there is a light at every tunnel. That amongst the differences is everyone has their own bliss, because everyone's subjective. But amongst that is the allegory of the light at the end of the tunnel. And for me, that's something that I will devote my whole life to, and sharing my own NDE. And as a therapist and as a hypnotherapist and teaching mindfulness classes, which is to really live a spiritually rich life, you have to understand, you have to believe that what you see today isn't always what is. And part of that is having faith, which is not always necessarily understanding what you see in front of you, but trusting in the process. And that's why I believe I had one. And it was a blessing and traumatic, yes, but also something that I'm here to devote my whole life to share to the public. So thank you for coming out here, and I look forward to future IANDS events with all of you. Yeah.
Would you like to share, you have a little time to share your actual NDE and what some of the few after effects were?
Absolutely. Well, it all occurred when I was 5 years old, and I took the podium at one of the most prominent Long Island metaphysical centers, and that happened to take place in the same town where I had my NDE, which is a place called Levittown, New York, home of the well-known Billy Joel. I believed he lived right around there, grew up there, that or Hicksville. But for me, having whooping cough, I was on a slide, and I literally tried to go up the slide, and I suffocated, and every part of my body just shut down one at a time, and then all of a sudden I was drawn into a tunnel at some insane speed. If you ever go to Six Flags or any roller coaster ride, that's kind of what it felt like. It was a journey within at some insane force that I didn't have control over, and it was taking me in. And then, after, my brain, shut down, I was able to attain what's called Christ consciousness, where I heard the whisper of Christ near the aside. I saw next to my right and left, going down the slide with me, my two spiritual guides who I can't believe that I forgot who they were. I think when we live life, we have many layers of human conditioning, but I think the more in tune that we are with our spirits, the more that we remember. And I think when you're enlightened, you kind of laugh a little bit, and for me, that's kind of what happened to me when I saw my spiritual guides. It was comical that I could forget who they were. They were the closest thing to me, and they're there with me since day one. And then after that, I saw about hundreds of thousands of angels right in front of my eyes. It's almost like cherubim that you see in churches, if you go to the Vatican or something like that, and that's very true. I think when artists tap into something, it's real. And just peacefully, they were right there, just floating right in front of me, and I was just standing there just like a dude. And it was pretty cool. And then I saw my whole soul family, which, if you ever watched the movie Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, that kind of what it reminded me of, where the family was kind of there on the bed and everyone was kind of enmeshed. For me, that's what the soul family is. From my understanding, when you go back and you cross over, you're with your soul family, which is to me a divine expression of God. And you carnate and reincarnate with similar type energies that all kind of vibrate similarly, in a similar style with incarnations that you have. But and then after that, I was drawn to lifetimes within the Bermuda Triangle, which many would know as Atlantis. And that also, I kind of understand why I was drawn to Atlantis, because if you understand Atlantis, it was kind of destroyed because people, there's a saying from my favorite book called Out on a Limb by Shirley MacLaine, and her spiritual mentor and guide, David, said, technology with the understanding of God is destructive, and technology with the understanding of God is virtually unlimited. So technology or higher intelligence or spiritual understanding with an understanding of where it comes from and the source of that energy, we're unlimited. But once we try to out-God God with our own infrastructures and our own buildings and everything like that, that's when we get too human, and that becomes problematic. So it's taking ego out, recognizing the source. But after that, I was forever changed. I had a traumatic brain injury, and kind of like our last guy who just spoke here, Mark Anthony, I was tapping in at every moment to whatever was there. And I've had OBEs that I do talk about in my talks, throughout the years, and it really allowed me to be a lot more hybrid being, which is a spiritual being having a human experience. And I was really able to kind of understand that. So it was something that I'm forever grateful for, and I'm thankful to be here on this podium today. One interesting story, I think when you hit rock bottom and you have a difficult time, that's when, many times people have spiritual awakenings, and I think NDEs have that. It's what's called the shake-up period. But years later, when I was about 17 or 18 years old, I was in a yoga seminar, and a woman came up to me and she says, you have a crowd right in front of you. I go, what are you talking about? What crowd? She goes, no, you're going to be a healer. You're going to be a speaker. I see you speaking in front of a lot of people. There's rows and rows. I go, you're crazy, because at the time I was struggling and, trying to get into community colleges and whatever, but she was right. The crowd's here. It's, and I'm thankful that she tapped into that period that I saw as a young guy, and she reminded me of it, and it's an honor. So thank you. Yeah.
My name is Pegi Robinson, and I'm not a public speaker. This is my first time speaking. I'm not anybody. I'm a grandmother, and I've had 2 NDEs, one as a child and one as an adult. And it was only about a year ago that I started processing the NDEs. I remembered them, I talked about them, but I didn't let them in and process them. So a year ago, I started writing my autobiography, which writing was my worst subject all through school, but I did it. And after I wrote for a few months, I thought, gosh, who's got time to read this big book? And I prayed. I said, God, could you give me something, some short, simple way of telling people my experiences in a nutshell, my NDEs experiences in a nutshell. The next morning, I woke up, got on my Facebook as usual, and where it says, what are you thinking? I started typing poems. So I felt they were a gift. It all come out, just a few poems. Within an hour, it was done. Can you hear me? Right. Sorry. And when it was done in about an hour, I thought, I couldn't have done better myself. So I go back in time, and I hope you can go back in time with me. I was 5 years old, 1966, and I drowned. My brother and I went down to a pond to go swimming. The pond. I shouldn't have ever gone out to the deep. I'm sinking, but no one can hear a peep. Screaming underwater does no good. It's too late to do what I know I should. The pain in my throat is more than I can bear. I can't get up to get some air. I have to stop and think what to do. I need to stop and stew. Suddenly, I am fine. It is all right. I was splashing and putting up a fight. The water is shiny green now and full of light. The fish are bumping into me. What a beautiful sight. I know I've died. Up I go to the top of the trees as I look down below. I can see so far away. I don't think this is where I want to stay. There must be a lot to do, I bet. Then someone says, don't go yet. I listen intently, but her voice is all I hear. I don't see her, but I know she is near. If they find you soon, you might go back. I don't see how. Her wisdom I lack. Before I can decide which way to go, I am hanging over his shoulder with my head hanging low. Water pours from my mouth and out my nose. I'm as sick as a dog, but off he goes. He runs in the house and leaves me alone. I want to go back. My life is my own. I can do what I want, and I want to do that. I was about to fly and never come back. I hear her voice again, but I see her now too. She tells me, someday love will be there for you. I make her promise before she goes. I head on home and go to bed. If anyone was glad I was okay, they never said. A few days later, my family went fishing at a lake. I was bored with fishing, so I wandered off in the woods. I felt led. The will of a wildflower. Can a wildflower talk? Because Mr. Anthony just said no. Because it did one day when I went for a walk. I was just a poor, plain little child, alone until I saw it growing wild. It grew out from under a rock in a dry, ugly place. Its joy and beauty I couldn't erase. It danced and clapped with the wind. Somehow that flower became my friend. It didn't speak or shout, but somehow it let me know what life is all about. It held a secret that helped it grow. If I listened quietly, it would let me know. It showed me a vision, that's what it did, of women discussing flowers that grow bright and big. Then I saw girls in ribbons and bows. They were loved and given a lot of clothes. Those girls were like the big fancy flowers, all dolled up and needing showered. But they weren't like this wildflower you see. It had a strong will just to be free. I thanked the flower as I went on my way, yet it had one more insight to say. Someday too, I would dance in the wind. Gifts of beauty and strength God will send. Neither riches nor pampered would my fortune be, but the will of a wildflower grows inside of me. The next, so that was an after effect. Of course, I didn't know that at the time. I didn't know what any of these things were back then. And now I'm going to go to age 16. Another spiritually transformative experience and after effect. Catching a ride. All I wanted was to escape the abuse. I tried to be good, but it was no use. He said he would take me to my dad's, but he won't let me out, and he's making me mad. I try to get away, but he wants a date. I need to go to my dad's. I can't go late. He takes me out in the woods into a shed. I crawl up against the wall in a tiny bed. I have a skill that blocks out the pain. I try to use it now, but it ain't the same. I prayed so hard and so tight, I find myself in the sky in the middle of the night. I float among the twinkling stars in the deep black sky. I feel so good, I don't care why. I know I am safe and was able to escape. He thinks he won and got his date. I look down at earth and what a view, so weightless and so blue. The wind blows my hair all around. Nothing but me in space, not a sound. Then I am back and he doesn't know. He thinks I was here. He didn't see me go. Was it a wish or a trick? How can it be? I avoided it all. It couldn't touch me. Unaffected, so easy it was to leave after all. God heard my cries and he didn't stall. I prayed and God came and lifted his cup high above the world so I wouldn't give up. How do I repay him? I'm not sure I can. All I can do is love him with all that I am. The next poem is the last experience I had as a child. It is the summer before my senior year. My hill. I walked through the woods, alone but not afraid. The world was dark. I thought, what a mess I have made. Troubles followed me wherever I went. God seemed so far away, so this is the prayer I sent. God help me, I'm just a teen. I just want to be loved. Why is everyone so mean? What can I do? I never know what to say. God, I just wish you weren't so far away. I love you and I need you. I am so lost and alone. Things haven't been good inside of my home. I will be 18 soon. I will have no help. God Almighty, I prayed as I knelt. Please help me know what to do. The world is about to get scary and new. Help me make a plan for my future, you see. I am so scared. I am down on my knees. I got up and along a path I walked. I saw a hill. I climbed it and talked. God, here I am with pain in my heart. This is as close as I can get, but we are still far apart. A warm wind blew my hair all around. Everything got quiet. There was not even a sound. His voice didn't speak, but somehow I knew he was right beside me saying, I love you. Hope filled my doubts and security replaced my fears. It was nearly 40 years ago, but that love doesn't change with years. God was right by my side, and I have never been alone. I only thought I was because of the hate in my home. 7 years later, I had my adult NDE. I was married. I had 3 little boys, and I was 2 months pregnant for twins. I started having pain, then I started bleeding. I would call my doctor every other day for a week and tell him, I think it's a tubal pregnancy. He said, why do you keep saying that? We did an ultrasound. Both the babies are in the uterus. By the end of the week, I couldn't hardly walk. So we went to the hospital. My husband stayed to sign the papers, and a nurse started pushing me down the hall. The twins. The pain is starting to fade. I think I am going to be sick. I can't seem to move my hands. My head drops to my chest. I'm about to pass out. I am shooting up to space. I am traveling so far away. I am so sorry, my children. I don't want to leave you. I am afraid. I know there's no turning back. I am in heaven. I think I'm alone. I am still me, but I can't see me. I am seeing someone. Who are they? I know who you are, sitting up front and center. I won't go. You can't make me. I have kids to raise. I am not the boss here. I must humble myself before you. If they will be better off, I will stay. If not, I beg you to return. I see now. It's not your fault that I am here. It's all mine. Deep sorrow overwhelms me. Who else will teach them about you? I am back. I feel my hands. I feel my body, then my feet. I hear the nurse speak. What the hell was that, I ask? How can it be? I was dead. Now I am me.
Thank you. All of us have different experiences, different times, and lots of different details. And although I haven't ever done this, I just want to explain something because I think it's also important. I've been associated with IANDS for almost 50 years, from the early 70s, and it was just my path. It came out of Vietnam. I was a nurse in Vietnam and had a young man talk to me, and that changed my life and my mission and passion for working with people who have NDEs. Many years later, not too long ago, in the last 10 years, I had different people telling me, well, it's a natural path. You had an NDE too. I said, no, I didn't ever have an NDE. And eventually, I came to think about it more. I did have an episode when I was 4 and almost bled to death after having my tonsils removed. And my mother was a nurse as well. And I remember she had been working nights. She picked me up and brought me home from the hospital. I went to bed, she went to bed, she'd worked all night. And all of a sudden, I started bleeding, and I was coughing up copious amounts of blood. And I went in to my mother, and I hit her, and I said, Mom, I'm bleeding. And she said, it's okay. And when you're a nurse and you're half asleep, and she said, go back to sleep. And I'm thinking, what? And so anyhow, I was a good little girl. I went back in bed, and about 2 seconds later, my mother bounded out of bed. It had registered what I had said, and she came bounding in there, and I was just throwing up blood everywhere. So she grabbed me, took me back to the hospital, and I remember very little after that time. And the point is, the path I took after that is, when I look back, is very obvious for many different ways and choices that I made. But I have no recollection of an NDE or the parts of an NDE. And for so many NDEers, that's how they figure it out. You have to go to, did you have a clinical incident? Were you sick? Did you have an accident? Did something happen? And then, did you have after effects? You have to jump the whole NDE and go to the after effects. And I have had many of these after effects. So for those people who say, I didn't have an NDE, you just didn't remember your NDE. And that makes it almost more difficult sometimes, because it's one thing to remember you had this glorious experience, or an experience in which you were flying, you went someplace, you had an experience, but for those people who didn't have that, but went on to question many, many things, I knew I was different as a child. And yet now we look at children NDEers, and they are very different. And without guidance or support, that becomes very sad for them sometimes. They become isolated because these are kids that think differently, behave differently, want to do different kinds of things. And if they don't have kind of enlightened parents, and many parents aren't, it is difficult. I have a nephew who I recognized as an NDEer at 18 months. My brother, oblivious to any differences. His wife, thank God, was a psychiatric nurse clinician, and she would listen. But here's a child, with some of the characteristics and after effects. He goes to get his very first haircut. He's maybe 2, but he's starting to speak in sentences. Increased vocabulary, very important for children with NDEs. And the hairdresser says to him, well, Matthew, what are you going to do when you grow up? She was trying to distract him. And he looked at her and said, well, I'm going to be a minister. And she said, oh, okay. And so when they get all done, she goes to my brother, and they had been friends, and she said, Kevin, did you know your son's going to be a minister? And of course, my brother's oblivious. And he said, what, Matt? And Matt said, well, what'd you think? I was going to be an architect or an illustrator? And by that time, everybody's just sort of looking. And many, many things happen like that. And I would encourage Matt to talk to me. And I said, Matt, do you ever see things? He said, I see the light beings. And I said, what do the light beings say? He said, oh, they tell me things to read. I talk to God. I learn things. I problem solve. I said, do you tell your mother these things? You need to tell your mother, because I was in the Army and not always home. And so we would talk about these things. Probably the classic event was my mother had just lost my dad. I was sitting in the kitchen with her. Matt was wandering around or doing something. He's about 4. And I'm telling my mother that it wouldn't be unusual to see my father. He might show up, and I don't want you to be afraid. And she's also a nurse, and so she just says, I don't believe in any of that stuff. Don't tell me about it. I said, oh, okay, whatever. And I go downstairs to do the wash or do something. Down comes Matt. Aunt Di, I see Grandpa. Where? He's here all the time. What's he look like? He's got his gray sweater on and those old raggy pants. And he looks just like Grandpa, except not so thick. And I thought, what a wonderful description of a spirit. And he said, yeah, we talk. You know, he said, it's not like talking. He comes in my brain and I go in his brain. And he tells me all about this experience. No one to tell this to, and he wouldn't have told me unless he had heard the key. So there are so many wonderful, wonderful things that happen once you know and you can encourage kids. But I just wanted to put the word out there for those who don't remember their NDE but have an inkling that they've had one, and it's a good idea to start reading and doing some things, looking at the after effects and see if you can take it back to a clinical crisis of some kind. We want to also save a little time for questions, but Lisa has something to say.
I just, thank you. I just wanted to ask you, how many in this people have had or remember having a near-death experience? And how many people in this room have a feeling that that might have happened, but you don't remember the specific incidents? And that's why you're here. How many people that have had the experience or have a feeling that they have the experience have actually written it down? So that was a beautiful journey you took us on. It was beautiful. I saw everything. And I was in the water with you and in the shed, and it was beautiful. And I just wanted, the power of story is so powerful. You see it in the media, and some people miss it in the media, and that's when you don't feel it. It is that story that you have is your unique blueprint in this world that has been given to you intentionally. It's been given to you intentionally. That story, if you don't tell it, is almost, and I'll go on a limb here, is almost a slap in the face to that divinity that gave it to you. Do you understand? That story is your personal blueprint on this planet, and how you affect and change other lives is telling that story. If you just write it in a poem, if you post it on your Facebook, if it impacts one person, then you've done what you're here to do, because that one person will impact another and another and another. I am such a big proponent of telling your story, and that's why I'm on media, because I love it. That's what I do, is I let other people and want other people to tell their story all day long, every day. Tell me your story. Just tell me your story. Tell me your story. Can that affect other people? And so anyone in this audience who's had an experience Or maybe you have the ability to tell stories, but you want to tell other people's stories, connect with people in this room. Know you're here for a reason, obviously. I mean, here in this conference, in this incredible assembly of spiritual beings that are having human experiences. You're here for a reason. Use the time. Don't just be passive in the audience. Talk, communicate, and you've set up a lot of great ways to do that. Yeah, just wanted to share that.
Thank you so much. We're gonna ask, if you'd like to ask a question, can you go over to the microphone so that we can hear you? I want to put out just one, while we're waiting for that to happen. As many of you know, I'm also a veteran, a disabled veteran, and spent 25 years in the military. And I am working right now on a project for veterans to get this information out to veterans because they are treated very badly in the VA because people do not recognize that they have had an NDE or what an NDE is. They get diagnosed as bipolar, etc., and it just isn't good. And we're also trying to help those in the active duty. So I have spent a couple of years trying to raise money. We have a film now. I have a slide. We're putting a whole program together, and now we'll start funding to go out and teach in those hospitals. So if there's anybody there that has family that was military or resonates with this issue, please help me and send donations for veterans, the Veteran Fund, and let us try to help these veterans who are not getting taken care of right now. People just don't know what an NDE is in the military, but they have a lot of other things to worry about, so I get that, but we need to help them. Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, my question is that all of you, I heard so many NDE experiences, and I was wondering how it changed your life or your relationship with other people and other kind of, even professionally and socially.
Oh, yeah, that's one of the very common characteristics of a near-death experience is it will change your life, your career, your trajectory, your every relationship. Because everything that not only do you get a calling from that experience, but you get a bigger sense of what is, and you get you realize that you're a tiny part of such a infinite universe that there's a reason to tell that story, and that's why I created the Aware Show. It was just out of that experience. And I'm constantly guided to change relationships, infinite changes with relationships. I see everybody completely as their soul. I will see your soul before I will hear the words out of your mouth.
I always say those who have had NDEs, if you ever see the movie Hook with Robin Williams, it's kind of like that, where Robin just had his suit on and he was going on his day-to-day experience, but he had subtle reminders that there was something that he was missing, something that just wasn't right, and he actually went back to Neverland and flew and did his. So to me, those who have had NDE experiences really allow themselves to take off the veil of forgetfulness and remember their magical ancient past, and it really allows you to have a fuller taste of life and experience, and it gives life a lot more of a purpose. And also it's very unifying, because if you recognize that you come from the same place and you recognize that you all go to the same place, and that takes away some of the divisive constructs of religion. So that's what it taught me, at least, yeah.
I'm from Southeast Ohio, and this stuff is not accepted there. I've been trying to start a group for over a year, and no one is interested. The churches either think it's the devil or they think you're crazy, and so I haven't been able to get people together. But as personally, I did investigations for years, and I had no idea why, but I got confessions really easy. I knew exactly what was going on very easily, and nobody could understand how I knew these things. I didn't either.
Yes, sir.
I want to make a comment on the power of story and connect it with Mark Anthony's concept of higher vibration. In the power of the story, there is each time you tell your story, you go deeper and deeper into the story. And the story becomes more real and more healing, particularly if it's like some of your poetry where there was fear. It becomes much more healing. Story is healing. And it also raises our vibrational level the deeper we go into the story. I'm not sure I ever had a near-death experience. I have had out-of-body experiences when I was very, very ill. And I could see all these people in white coats around the bed. I wasn't sure who was in the bed. I wondered who it was. And then I realized it was me. I was probably unconscious maybe 4 or 5 days. It was, I had pneumonia. And at that time, the only thing they knew to get the fluid out of your lungs was to wrap your chest very, very tight, which was very, very painful. But I want to emphasize the power of telling your story. And we need to tell it over and over and over again. Because each time you tell it, there is an additional healing that is happening within your soul. And don't give up on starting a group. People think we're crazy, whatever. But continue to tell your story because it's healing for you and for the person who heals it. Even though they may not know it, it is touching their spirit.
Thank you so much. And where there is one, there is more. So find a person, meet, talk, share, and you'll find another person, and it will come together because you know there are experiencers there. They're just acting out of fear. Yes, sir.
Well, I would like to thank Milton for what you just said because that spoke very close to my heart. That I just recently wrote my story, and I've known most of my adult life that I was supposed to write it, but there were pieces missing and parts I didn't understand. So when I got into writing it, I tended to go into circles, and I just knew it wasn't complete. Then when my mother finally died in 2012, she finally had a point where I spent a lot of time with her next to her bed, listening to her talk about all the regrets and things that happened to her in her life. And that was when she admitted to me that she felt that I was close to death when I was born. So that brought everything full circle to me, and all of a sudden I understood some of the things that I was remembering weren't from my near death at age 8. It actually happened the day I was born. My introduction to life was death. So from the beginning of my life, I was labeled different, not only by the community, but by my mother. Because she said as a baby, I didn't respond for like 3 or 4 weeks. And she felt that there was something wrong with me. So on her deathbed, she told me that all of her life, she carried the guilt that I was retarded.
No, she knows differently now.
Well, when she got older, she opened up. When I got to be about 22, 23, I wrote my story the best I could remember, from when I was
Wonderful.
8 years old. And that was from sickness. That was from appendicitis. So I basically, to round it up here, I wanted to say thank you for existing, first of all. But I came here for 2 reasons. I wanted to meet other near-death experienced people, because never in my life have I really had a conversation with another person who's had a near-death.
Got a few people here.
And yes, obviously. And then the other thing was, I wanted to talk to some others who perhaps have experience with publishing, because I put my story on Kindle and I've sold a grand total of 1 unit. So,
Lisa might be able to help you with that, and maybe you could
Yeah.
hook up after.
It was hard to let it go. It was really hard to let it go and to say, okay, click that button and send it. But
Yeah.
it's there now.
I'll give 2 quick pieces on that. When you're writing your story, if you've had a near-death experience, you will not be able to put the pieces together. You can leave those pieces out and then start interviewing people in your life, because they'll be able to fill in the gaps, because you obviously weren't here. That is very, very typical characteristic. That's so good for you for following that path. You can self-publish on Amazon. There are blogs. There are so many ways. It doesn't even matter how many people buy it. It is the process of writing it. Universe takes care of the rest. Those that need it will find it. And I just want to say thank you real quick, because this is an example of a pioneer who has an experience and starts an organization like this and provides the space for people like you to connect with people like you. And you're a visionary, and I want to just say thank you for all that you have done.
Yes, thank you.
I didn't actually start the organization, but I did join very early. One comment, Milton, I think you ought to think a little bit more and ask a few people about whether you're an experience or not. Angels and people around your bed, and you in the bed and up above the bed, very resident of NDEs. So you might want to think about that a little more. Yes.
Hi,
One last
this is the
question.
first time I've ever attended a conference like this, because I wanted to meet other people
Come
who've
close.
had my experience, have this experience. I had my NDE when I was 20. And I've read a lot of books about all of this, and kept quiet for a long time, because, I don't want people to think I was nuts. But after reading a lot of material, I have yet to find, and maybe I haven't read the right books, but I have yet to find anybody who has this glorious experience and then they have to come back here. I did not want to be here. I was so unhappy. I went into a very, very dark part of my life. And I'm just wondering, does other NDEers experience this? I mean, it's not glory, It's like, why would you want to come back here?
There are lots of people that
Thanks.
choose not to come back.
Yeah, I do, but I don't know why.
And there is a purpose for you coming back, and part of your experience will be to find that purpose. So there are a lot of books out there, and there are a lot of experiencers here, so you might be able to sit and talk with them. But what they know, and one of the reasons in the research, we know people don't who attempted suicide and then have an NDE and never attempted again, they know that's not the way. That is not going to happen. You have a purpose here. You have life to live, and it does happen to a lot of people. And so I would seek out some folks, or have them seek you out. They're here. They're here. We're going to have to stop this now. We could go on for hours. We have another talk coming, so thank you very much, everybody, for your attention and help, and thank you for your story.